As more and more sightings are happening around the world, it is becoming more and more evident that we are not alone in the universe. Dr. Michio Kaku.
Now we have 400 sightings by U.S. Navy pilots and seasoned military personnel that cannot be explained. These objects fly between Mach 5 and Mach 20 times the speed of sound.
Wow.
These objects can drop 70,000 feet within a matter of seconds. These objects can zigzag, creating G-forces that are several hundred times the force of gravity, enough to crush the bones of any humans. These objects can fly without creating any exhaust. In other words, quote, they're not ours, unquote, as stated by one Pentagon official. Then the next question is, if they're not ours, then whose are they?
In a later interview, Michio Kaku also acknowledges how our government has stated that the unidentified phenomena are not the U.S. military craft.
Well, the military has finally owned up to this. For the first time in history, the military now admits that, quote, they are not ours. You see, before you could always play this cat and mouse game with the media saying that maybe they're stealth bombers, maybe they're experimental aircraft being perfected at Area 51. Nope. The military now admits that they're not ours.
It is very clear that these unidentified flying objects have capabilities far beyond mankind's technology. Our government has released what some to believe the best UFO authentic coverage to date captured by our military. The following is gun camera and audio footage of the incident.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. Oh my gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing! It's rotating. Echo 6-1 Tango Project, over. Oh, got it! Woohoo! Roger, there's troubleshooting. What the fuck is that? Did you box moving target? No, I took an auto track. Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, dude. Wow, look at that, man. Look at it fly!
There have been many incidences of UFOs interfering in the military nuclear launch sites. Not understanding how or why. But many believe that UFOs have the capability to shut down our missile sites at will. The following interview is from Captain Robert Salas, who served 21 years at the Air Force and was a missile launch officer during one of these incidences.
I was there as on a combat crew. We had control of 10 nuclear missiles, and sometime in the evening I was in command, and I received a phone call from my guards upstairs because we were underground, and he said that they were seeing strange lights in the sky, flying very fast and stopping and reversing course and making maneuvers that they didn't think aircraft could make. So I was not, didn't consider his comments seriously, I guess. And so I basically hung up the phone, and then he called back 5 minutes later, and this time he was very frightened, very scared, shouting into the phone, saying that he saw, he had his guards there, and they were seeing a oval-shaped orange-red object hovering just above the gate of our facility. And he was frightened. He wanted me to tell him what to do. What should he do? And so I said something like, make sure nothing comes in, use force if necessary, but we had to protect the weapons that we had. So he hung up the phone, and I went to tell my commander about this phone call. And as I was speaking to him, the missiles went into inoperable condition, what we called no-go. They could not be launched, and we lost all 10 of them while this object was still above us. He reported this to the command post, and they told him the same thing had happened at another site, although it was a week earlier. But they also lost 10 missiles due to this object. So I report on this, and later we were told never to speak about this.
There also have been statements that our government have recovered alien craft that have crashed. Richard Doty is a former Air Force intelligence officer and discusses a crash of a UFO and the recovery of the craft and a live alien in New Mexico.
In 1947, 2 craft crashed in New Mexico. They collided, and one crashed near Corona, New Mexico, which is public record. The second craft crashed way out west of Magdalena, New Mexico, and that wasn't found until 2 years later. But the one that crashed in Corona, they also found a live alien. That live alien was named Eva, and he was transported to, it was a male, was transported to Los Alamos, where he lived out his life. He died in 1952. But during that time period that he was with us, he told us a plethora of information about what they have learned about the universe and what their technology is. Their technology is probably estimated to be about 50,000 years ahead of us.
Not only have there been reports on UFOs shutting down our nuclear missile sites, there are many encounters military pilots engaging or attempting to identify and intercept UFOs. In 2004, there was an incident involving Commander David Fravor and his wingman investigating an object on radar. The 2 pilots were ordered to intercept the unknown flying craft.
I was the commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 4-1, the Black Aces. We're flying brand new Super Hornets. It was an air defense exercise, 2 good guys against 2 bad guys. Probably 70 miles, 60 miles off the coast, in the gap between San Diego and Ensenada. The Princeton control comes up and says, we're going to suspend training. We have real-world tasking. So we start heading off to the west. The other airplane is on my left-hand side.
I was the junior pilot trying to keep up with the senior pilot in the lead aircraft.
We're looking, we don't see anything on our radars at all. And we're talking to each other trying to figure this out. So it goes down 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, gets all the way down. They get to a point where they can't separate us from the blip. They call it merge plot, which means you're in the same space as whatever you're looking for, and you got to start looking outside because the radar can't help you. I hear, hey skipper, do you see? And as he's saying that, I notice the tic tac. It's white, it has no wings, it has no rotors. I go, holy, what is that? And he goes, I don't know. This thing would go instantaneous from one way to another, similar to if you threw a ping pong ball against a wall. And we start to kind of orbit, because now we're going to watch this thing. We start a right-hand turn, and we're going from a clock code. The object is in the middle of the clock, and we're at 6 o'clock, and we're driving around the circle. So we get to about 9 o'clock, and it's just still doing its little erratic thing, kind of moving around this disturbance in the water. And I go, hey, I'm going to go check it out. I'm going to go down there. As we're coming down nice and easy, we get to about the 12 o'clock position, and all of a sudden it goes, boop, and it kind of turns, and now it's mirroring us, and it starts coming up. And we're like, okay, now it knows we're here.
It seemed to be aware, and it seems to recognize him.
It goes from basically just almost a hover into a pretty aggressive climb up to our altitude, so there's a bit of fear because now you're out there dealing with something that you have no idea what it is. It's actually reacting to what we're doing. I'm kind of pulling nose, to where he's going to be, and he's coming up. He just rapidly accelerates beyond anything that I've ever seen. Crosses my nose, and it's gone. And I'm like, whoa. The controller from the Princeton comes up right as we're doing all this and says, hey, sir, you're not going to believe this. He goes, but that thing is at your cap point. You got something that can accelerate and disappear and then show up 60 miles away. Kind of in awe a little bit, because you go, whoa, we don't have that. And I'm talking, we're flying one of the premier airplanes on the planet. What was this? There was a capability out there. Don't know where it's from. Not saying it's from outer space, but not saying it's from here either. The next crew is getting ready. So we're talking to them about this, and they're like, you gotta be kidding.
as our government releases more files on UFOs. The evidence is compiling. These craft performing maneuvers and speeds are decades ahead of our present technology to date. Luis Elizondo, former director of a TIP Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, has a discussion on UFOs.
Is that it is some sort of secret U.S. tech that somehow we have managed to keep secret even from ourselves for a long period of time. The second option is that it's some sort of foreign adversarial technology that has somehow managed to technologically leapfrog ahead of our country, despite having a fairly robust and comprehensive intelligence apparatus. And of course, the third option is something quite entirely different. It's a different paradigm completely. Now, as of this week, we now know through some of the discussions at senior level leadership that this report has definitively stated once and for all that it's not our technology. And that's hugely important. For 30 years, there has always been this undercurrent, if you will, these conspiracies that there was some sort of TR-3B program and some sort of super special technology that has been implemented, and we've been just been very careless about it. And I think that argument was finally put to bed this week. So that really only leaves two other options. And that's, again, it's foreign adversarial, or it's something quite different. And I think we're now beginning to learn, as we've heard from the Director of National Intelligence, and I can certainly tell you from my experience, that we're pretty confident that it's not Russian or Chinese technology, who said this isn't Russian technology. And as we know, during Glasnost and the fall of the Berlin Wall, there was this 5-year romance period, if you will, between the United States and Russia, where we began really sharing a lot of information. And a lot of their, ironically enough, a lot of their UFO information wound up in our hands. And it turns out that they were experiencing the exact same issues from a UFO or a UAP issue perspective that we were. So if you look at really the timelines here, it's looking increasingly less likely that this is some sort of Russian technology. So that really leaves China. And some of these reports, you're absolutely correct, Jackie, they go back into the early 1950s and even earlier. And so what that says is that you have pilots, whether we're describing what we call a white flying Tic Tac or a white flying butane tank in the 1950s or a white flying lozenge, if you will, they're all describing the exact same vehicle, craft, if you will, doing exactly the same thing, performing in ways well beyond our current capabilities. And if you look at that from a temporal perspective, from a time perspective, it simply doesn't make sense that China back in 1950 would have this beyond next generation technology, mastered it, is able to fly it at will anywhere it wants on the face of the planet. And the last 70 years, despite the billions of dollars we put into our intelligence community infrastructure and architecture, it has managed to evade us.
There is a lot of speculation of an Air Force base called Area 51 in Nevada that has recovered crashed alien UFOs. For years it is said that this base is working on reverse engineering and working to understand how these craft work. Bob Lazar has claimed he has worked at this base and has witnessed alien craft.
Essentially, a brief synopsis on some of the other projects that were going on there. Supposedly, the information, now this isn't something that I determined, it's something I was told, that the crafts originated from a planet that orbited the Zeta Reticuli star system. Zeta Reticuli 1 and Zeta Reticuli 2 are two stars of a binary star system. The craft allegedly came from there. Witnessed one test flight up close, officially. That I was just inside the hangar. The test was going off probably, just as the sun was going down. And it was a low performance test. I believe there were some pilots or test pilots in the craft. The craft must have been retrofitted to fit them because the seating arrangements were really not accommodating. They were in radio communication with the craft, which is kind of surprising to me because the gravity waves that the craft was producing should have distorted the radio waves also. So apparently there's something there that I don't understand. The craft lifted off the ground, virtually noiseless, other than a small corona discharge on the bottom of the craft, indicating the presence of high voltage. That dissipated at about 30 feet, and it stood there completely silently, and moved over to the left, to the right, and sat back down. That was the entire test. However, that was an extremely impressive test.
As the years have passed, our government has shifted policy from not investigating UFO reports and denial to now releasing unclassified reports consistently. Nick Pope held a position in the British Ministry of Defence and was assigned to investigate UFO sightings.
Yes, I mean, it's a very interesting point because the whole situation reminds me of what happened during the Second World War with the so-called Foo Fighters. These were small balls of light and metallic discs that followed aircraft on bombing raids. And of course, at first, British and American pilots reported these things and thought that it was some sort of Nazi secret weapon. Well, after the war, it transpired that the Germans and the Japanese had been having these too. So as you say, it is absolutely a global phenomenon. And of course, this also is exactly the debate that we're having right now with these sightings involving the US Navy. The Tic Tac incident, the other ones, we've seen the 3 videos, of course, and the question arises, is this Russia, is it China, or is it something else? And it was interesting because Senator Marco Rubio, who's the acting chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, gave a very interesting interview about this. And he said, look, I'd almost rather this was extraterrestrial, because given the speeds and maneuvers that are being reported for these things, we're in big trouble if this is Russia and China. Well, when you've got the acting chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee saying, I hope this is aliens, then it just shows you what a changed landscape we're in, given that, I'm sure you can remember, 3-4 years ago, the official position of the US government was that nobody's interested in this subject or investigating at all. Well, now we know differently. And yeah, this story came out in December 2017 when the New York Times put it on the front page and said, yeah, we've, amongst other things, we know that there was this program called ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. 3 videos, as you say, nobody is pretending that there's just 3 videos or 3 incidents. The US Navy themselves said this is part of a series of ongoing incursions into restricted military airspace. What was interesting to me, and this is the thing that I think a lot of people have missed, is that after the New York Times ran that story, there was really no need for the Department of Defense to say much more than, yeah, we'll give you a brief comment on this. But last year, they formally posted these 3 videos on their own website and issued a press release where they said the previous releases were unauthorized, but now we are putting them out for everyone to see. And yes, they are genuine US Navy videos. And yes, the phenomenon characterized in these videos remains unexplained. And the reason that's interesting is because it's almost as if every time this story is in danger of dying down, the Department of Defense itself throws gasoline on the fire and the whole thing flares up again. So that is interesting. His warning was that first contact between us and extraterrestrial civilizations might be like the European explorers encountering the Native Americans. And as Hawking concluded, that didn't end too well for the Native Americans. But I think that the problem with all this is that there's nothing we can do about it. The genie is out of the bottle. We have been a detectable civilization for decades because of our radio and television broadcasts and certain radar emissions, and there's nothing we can do about that. Like I say, it's a done deal. Any civilization capable of threatening us is already aware of us. So yes, I understand the warning that Stephen Hawking gave, but as I say, it's too late to worry about that now.
UFO sightings have been documented for hundreds of years. With cell phones so common, there has been an increase of recorded sightings. One thing is for sure. We are not alone in the universe and have been visited and will continue to be visited by extraterrestrials. Some predict we will have contact with aliens in the close future. Will the human race be ready?